Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Pål and Ville. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
We are back. We are back in your feed. We are back on YouTube, and we are back with the first episode of Nordic Fintech Highlights for Season 14 of Fintech Daydreaming. We will be doing, as we always do, sharing with you the hot news, what's been interesting and what's been going on during the month of July here in the Nordics. And obviously for me, the most important thing that happened during that month was the release of my book, Rip Out the Core, which is now out. It is in hard copy. It's also in digital if you want to read the digital version, but it is now here. So get a copy of it and let me know what you think of it. But I know there's other more important, interesting news that we will dive into and review and discuss of what happened during the summer break period here in the Nordics. So maybe not as much excitement as normal, but it's definitely been some. I am Pål. I am going to be your host for this episode. But as always, we never do this as a one-man thing. I am joined by my wonderful good friend, Ville. So, Ville, how are you? Have you read my book?
Well, I have glanced through it, let's put it that way. But you know I love the book anyway, so I think that's all covered. Speaking of July, by the way, as everybody knows, the month of July is a very, very slow month, especially here in the Nordic countries. But I was fortunate enough to actually work through July, and I can confirm that it's very quiet, even if you're working. But it did give me a chance to follow up on the news kind of feed for July, as slow even as that was, a bit more. So I should be well equipped for this July news episode now, and looking forward to it.
Wonderful. And as we keep saying, I think it's fantastically incredible that we've already made it to season 14. So this is astonishing. And the number of people subscribing and following us is growing on a steady base. So that's great. But as it is an episode of Nordic Fintech Highlights, we always do this in partnership with our fantastic friends at Helsinki Fintech Farm. They are the ones that pull together all the news articles. They evaluate them, review them, see what's been exciting and interesting in the Nordics over the month. And then they create a newsletter, which we hope you're all subscribed to. If you're not, then you go to their website, Helsinki Fintech Farm, and you subscribe to their newsletter. You'll get a fantastic newsletter where they go through all of the headlines. We don't have time to do that on this episode. We will just pick out what's been more interesting for us. But as always, we do this with Janne, who is the smartest of the crew at Helsinki Fintech Farm, and always helps us to analyze and look across what has been happening in the month. So, Janne, how are you? Have you recovered from summer vacations, and have you read my book?
Yes, I have recovered from the summer vacation. All good here, back in business. And yeah, I have started to read your book, but I haven't finished it yet. I have to admit that I have recently become more like a lazy audiobook guy. So just reading books isn't that natural to me anymore, but I'll definitely read that at some point to the end.
Well, there is an audiobook available, so
Oh, there is already. Okay, I didn't know about that. Okay.
Yes.
It's read by you?
No, it's not. Actually, there isn't. I'm lying to you. There isn't an audiobook available. I was thinking digital. You see, my brain is gone foggy already. So no, there isn't an audiobook. We need to organize that. I lied to you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's potentially one in the making. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. But this episode is all about the highlights from July. Just as a quick summary, as we always do, Janne, do you want to tell us what was the general feel for the month of July in the Nordics around the world of fintech and banking technology?
Yes. So the news were similar to the weather, not very hot this month or last month, which is quite usual in July, the holiday season. So we saw some Q2 results from banks, nothing too surprising, just one funding round, and then few transactions. And then I think the most interesting news, what we actually saw, newsworthy things were quite much around the digital euro. So there were some cases around the pilot, which we can also dig into today. But yeah, holiday season as expected.
So generally slow, but still some interesting news articles and headlines that we will take a deeper look at. And before we do that, as is always the case, we need to sneak in a good but bad joke somewhere. And Janne, we've always decided that you are our standing guest for these episodes, and therefore the joke falls onto you. Do you have a joke you want to share with us and the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. It's terrible.
Good.
Was that the joke?
So, why did the snake pass the bank's sanction screening?
No idea.
No idea.
Obviously, no arms dealer.
Very good. Very good.
I want to know where you're getting your jokes from, Janne. You seem to have a very good reserve of very bad jokes. So thank you. One of the things that I will actually do, it's a little unusual, based on the headlines today and the news that we're going to be looking at. One of the news articles that will come up, I need to point out and highlight that all views and ideas that I share here today are mine personal. They are not in any way related to the company I work for and the work that I do. It is me, my personal opinion. And I just want to make that very clear. Okay, with that, let's start looking at some headlines and diving in. Maybe we should start with you this time, Ville. What was the headline that caught your attention that you thought was noteworthy to look into a little bit further?
Yeah, maybe I need to also note that the views and opinions are my personal ones, not of anyone else or any other institution, because the news that I picked is quite close to one of my favorite topics, and that's the digital euro. Like Janne mentioned, the ECB was quite active, relatively active, in July in providing updates about the digital euro. I think this lines quite well with the kind of holiday period that they have in more Central Europe, because they usually have the vacations in August. So of course they were busy cleaning the table in July while the Nordics were on vacation. But this resulted in a couple of big announcements from the ECB when it comes to digital euro, and the bigger one was basically the fact that they have selected 36 payment service providers to join the digital euro pilot. So as a brief recap, what is the digital euro? Digital euro is the European Central Bank's central bank digital currency project for retail, where they aim to launch a central bank digital currency for all euro area citizens. And then it will be legal tender, which means that you will be able to pay with the digital euro at any point of sale that is capable of accepting digital payments. The timeline is for this is to launch by end of 2029 in all Euro countries, according to the current plan. And they have been working on this quite a long time already. I think they started in 2022 already. So a very long project. And now they're showing progress in terms of moving into concrete implementation with the digital euro in the form of a pilot. Some of you might remember we had Aleksi Grym from Bank of Finland as a guest in the beginning of this year. And he mentioned this pilot, and we even talked about some specifics of what they wanted to do with the pilot. And those facts have remained the same. So they selected now the payment service providers and the banks who will be participating, and they aim to launch the pilot in mid-27. This leaves a roughly about 12-month implementation time for all the participating payment service providers and banks. And of course, this is, while it's to some fintechs especially sounds like a long time, when you're dealing with 36 different institutions and the central bank is governing this, it is actually quite a short time frame to launch something like this. The pilot will cover basic payments in a physical or contactless payments in a physical point of sale. So there's going to be one point of sale per country by the looks of it, where the pilot participants will be able to pay with the digital euro. The users will be only central bank employees and therefore very limited amount of people who will be using it. And they will also be able to pay person to person, also cross borders. So if you are a pilot participant in Finland, you can pay to pilot participants in Germany, for example. Then the other ones are e-commerce, basically, and then they also want to test the offline payment part. Now, but some interesting takeaways from this. So first of all, they selected 36 payment service providers. Great. They said that they received over 50 applications, which means that it's quite likely that if 36 of the 50 were approved, there's an interesting question on which ones were not approved and why. The ECB did not disclose any of this information in terms of why or which institutions were excluded, and nor why, of course, they were not qualified in their opinion for this. Best guess I would say here is that there were multiple applications in certain countries for multiple banks and payment service providers, both on the distributing and acquiring side, and therefore they had to limit perhaps the kind of participants in a single country. The other reason, of course, can be that they were fairly young fintechs, or they were not properly credentialed in Europe, because they want to build this as a purely European solution, as we know. In Finland, again, since we're recording this in Finland, it's worth mentioning that this bank that was selected for this in Finland is OP Bank, and they are on the acquiring side. It will be Nexi. So they're going to be working together with Bank of Finland to launch this in Finland by mid-27, and it's going to be interesting to see how this will be proceeding here, monitoring this, of course, very, very closely. The only country that was left out of this pilot was Malta, and there are many reasons why Malta maybe is not part of this. But one speculation that was at least I would also maybe sign is that Malta has been profiling itself as a kind of crypto friendly country, and perhaps this both on the ECB side and Malta side maybe it was not then perfectly aligned with what they want to achieve with the digital euro. Obviously, Malta will be part of the digital euro ultimately, but again, for the pilot, they are out. So yeah, lots of interesting times. The ECB has also promised full transparency on the progress of the pilot. So we will be looking forward to updates on how different institutions are progressing and what are the kind of lessons learned from this pilot as we proceed. And again, looking forward to interesting couple of years with this pilot.
What can I say? That was another educational session on the digital euro by Ville. I think we've come to the end of the time, and it's time for us to say goodbye. So, dear listeners, no, I'm joking, obviously. Thank you, Ville. That was actually fantastically detailed and an awful lot good summary. I think probably even better than any of the news articles that are out there. For me, I think this is very interesting. I think we're now seeing things moving from theoretical to practical. There is no longer a question of is digital euro going to happen or not. It's a question of when. It's a question of how quickly this can be pushed through and how well the pilot will be executed. I think it is, like you said, it is a huge undertaking. When you start pulling all of these banks together, banks generally don't move that fast. I think some of the banks have, as you indicated to a certain degree, selected to use external partners to look more at a utility-based model rather than trying to rip their whole IT apart internally, which probably makes an awful lot of sense if you've been given 12 months to execute a pilot and probably not a lot of leeway on getting it wrong. So still very interesting. It's interesting to see the banks that have been selected in each of the countries to execute on this. I hope that they all are successful. I hope that we're going to see a successful project through this. I know we're going to have some some ups and downs. There are going to be naysayers sitting on the corner waiting for the first hiccup to say, there you go, proved it. I told you it's not going to work. But like most projects, we are going to have some hiccups and we're going to have some problems along the way. But I look forward, just like you said, I look forward to seeing how this progresses going forwards and the results coming out of it.
Yeah, a lot of interesting build by partner decisions have been done already and will be done in the very near future when it comes to digital euro. So there's going to be a high activity on this, especially on the vendor side, which we're kind of seeing at the moment. And the reason why that activity is happening is of course because of the pilot. But another thing that happened now during the summer was that the European Parliament voted in favor of the digital euro legislation, and it proceeded into what they call the trilogue negotiations. And the result of that we're expecting towards the end of the year, which would then finally give the final kind of go ahead for the digital euro, and we will get a lot of confirmation on some of the design details, including the holding limits and the transaction fee structure, for example, which are big questions. Still not completely decided. But one thing is clear, the political momentum behind the digital euro is real. So even though you might hear some naysayers, especially from the private, let's call them digital currency space, they are saying that this is too slow, it doesn't really solve any problems. The political opinion is quite the opposite. So they believe that this is an important part of the European infrastructure in forms of payments, and will guarantee the European sovereignty also in the payment space. And I largely agree. There are a lot of things you don't actually like about the digital euro, mainly related to the competitiveness of private solutions and the interoperability. But aside of that, I think it's mostly positive still, and I truly believe that this will be very huge in the coming years in form of investments, but also the impact that it will have in the end. So again, my favorite project at the moment.
I think frequent listeners of our podcast know our position quite well on both the digital euro and stable coins, crypto, etc. So I don't think that will be any surprise that we are supporting this. I think this is a good idea. I think the continued political support behind it is very positive and good. I understand there is an implication here financially on the banks, but I think anything that helps our financial backbone as the European environment is very good, and it's required. But for you, Janne, we're diving now into a Ville and I can just sit here and mumbo jumbo about the digital euro for the next 48 hours. So what about you, Janne? What's your view on all of this? What was your reaction when you saw the news?
Well, I think it was quite obvious that it's going to happen. I've been also following professionally the side of things, and I think it's clear that it's going to happen one way or another, even without asking too much for public opinions. And I have to say that I have not seen recently very much news on the kind of the big mainstream media about the digital euro. So it's quite interesting to see when that picks up again, because now things are clearly moving forward. And when it comes to the pilot, it seems that there are many things in place and going to happen. Generally, as a Finnish citizen, I'm quite terrified about big public sector projects which has the word digital in it. They tend to be catastrophic quite often, but let's see, now they're pretty interesting and competent vendors involved. So looking forward.
Yeah, I guess the difference there is that the implementation will be mandated to be done by the private sector. So technically, It's not a public sector project from that perspective.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was actually going to say exactly the same. That yes, it is a central bank liability. It is seen as being public sector, but in reality, it's being implemented by the private sector to support a public sector capability to a certain degree, right?
Correct.
Well, let's move on. And we have now spent majority of the episode talking about the digital euro. We said that it was no big news in July, but I think this turned into an interesting discussion point anyway. Janne, what did you pick up as an interesting headline?
Yes, so there were some news about Denmark's National Bank building a backup bank for cyber attack scenarios. So they're building something that the press is calling a dormant emergency bank. And the idea is that if a major cyber attack takes place and blocks the access to bank systems for an extended period, there would be a separate layer that keeps the basic operations running. So basically for consumers, they could still access their balance and salary and payments, and also businesses could do the basic stuff there. Interesting thing in the news, they talked about prolonged AI-driven cyber attacks. I don't know what that does that actually mean, and what's the difference between a traditional cyber attacks that breaks everything. But anyway, we clearly have the DORA regulation on a European level, which is just related to the banks, that they would be more resilient, but this is then more like a backup layer if that even fails. So there is something backend that would still keep things running. And this was Denmark's own project, but I do think we have already something in place in Finland, something similar, which was done a few years ago. And also I know that Norway is as well building something very similar right now. So it's not just Denmark who is getting prepared. So yeah, I think that's something what we have been talking about in this episode in the past couple of years, because resilience is just a very important topic in the financial industry in general.
I think to a certain degree it's actually wider than just banking and finances. But Ville, what's your take on this headline?
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand the goal here, and what is a good goal. Again, we need to have more resilient systems, and we need to be prepared for all sorts of anomalies that might be impacting the payment functions and the ability to pay and have your money in a safe place. Great, but I'm unsure about the approach. I mean, there's this famous saying that why build only one when you can have two for only twice the price? So so again, we're building a dormant backup system, while we also might consider just maybe enhancing the existing systems to basically secure that it doesn't happen. I think this is a bit wrong approach. I'm sure it works, but maybe it's a bit wrong. And thirdly, we just talked about digital euro to exhaustion. So again, that's another kind of resilience play. And there's a lot of discussions on how that can be used. For example, I mean, of course, this is Denmark, but we have the same system in operation already in Finland. So how is the digital euro playing in all of this? And I feel there's a lot of redundancy, not just the planned redundancy, but also kind of unnecessary redundancy when it comes to all this kind of emergency systems and backup setups in payments and banking. So I would hope to see more kind of synergy and consolidation of all these initiatives, rather than kind of burying the sector with even more cost of building things like this. But I don't know, Paul, I mean, you've been designing systems like this in your day job forever. So what do you think? Do we need a completely dormant backup system, or can we do something better in the ones that we already have or are going to have in the future?
I find your statements a bit concerning. You think I've been spending my life building redundant standby systems in Denmark? No, I have not. But there is a couple of elements that sort of came to mind as I was reading the headlines, and I have to admit that some of this comes down to also, infrastructure management, etc. So maybe I don't have all the answers here, but some things that I was thinking on, I also picked up, Janne, on you did, with advanced AI-driven cyber attack. And we have recently in the news, if we stick outside of banking, we've seen a number of the AI companies having some models being able to break free from their confinements and doing things they potentially shouldn't be doing. So the first thing that sort of sprung to my mind is, if an AI model can get to the active environment, what's going to prevent it from getting to the dormant standby environment? right? Unless it's completely alienated. And if it's completely alienated, then the ability has to rely on the fact that at some point in time, you need to have some replication or migration or transparency of data to be able to enable that if Janne has 200 euros, he still has 200 euros when the standby comes online. Then how are you going to ensure that you don't accidentally also move something that potentially could be malicious as you're doing this synchronization, etc.? The other thing that I also sort of started thinking about was around quantum computing and everything else. So I agree with you, Ville. Building up a completely standalone on the side, that there are still some elements of this that you're not going to be able to protect against, as I see it. But there must be smarter people than me that have been involved in planning all of this and starting to put it together. And like you said, Janne, there are some similar things happening in other countries as well. But if I look at this from a Nordic perspective, we rely very heavily on two-factor authentications and the banks and connections and everything else. The banks going offline is one part of the puzzle. If everything gets hacked, I think we've got a much more fundamental problem associated with how all of these banking system, public sector system, etc., hang together. And is a dormant bank application going to help us to deal with all of that as well? So I think I've ended up with more questions than answers by reading this, but potentially a good idea, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, there was even like an addition that there is this card payment continuity program where the idea is that they could be able to use the common payment methods like Vipps, Apple Pay, Google Pay, MasterCard, Visa, etc. Up to 7 days of outage. So that sounds impressive, but yeah, I don't know how does that work in practice.
And actually, Ville, going back to the digital euro, this is where there's a good business case for the offline digital euro, right?
Yeah, and that's actually interesting part of the conversation on that front as well, is that the holding limits, for example, can be changed in extraordinary circumstances on the digital euro. So further asking the question, do we really need these backup systems, especially when we're building kind of the ultimate backup system in form of the digital euro? But again, the digital euro is just for the Eurozone, and it's not going to be ready until 29-30. So again, good to have something as a backup, I suppose. But again, just calling for the kind of making sure that we don't do overlapping things with all of these initiatives aimed at the same goal, especially from the regulation side. Exactly.
Yes. And then we get down to me and the news article that I found most interesting. And again, I need to iterate that all opinions expressed here are my own and do not in any way relate to my employment status or the companies that I associate with. But one of the things that we have discussed, actually, I think quite repeatedly on episodes of Nordic Fintech Highlights, is associated with some of the shifts we're seeing in the Finnish banking market. And we've been, dare I say, theorizing on the fact that we're going to start seeing mergers and acquisitions around the banks within Finland and potentially even on the Nordic market. And we have seen this now. The news headline came out in July that S-Bank, and we actually had the CEO of S-Bank join us earlier this year for a episode, Ville, where I think she alluded to that there was big plans in the pipeline. So we are seeing this coming out. But S-Bank has made a public tender to acquire Oma Savings Bank here in Finland. Oma is a publicly listed bank. So S-Bank has gone out and made an offer on all the shares at a price of 17 euros and 20 cents per share, which is above the market at the time when they made the offer. There's an offer period that will run from, I think it's the 17th of July to the 25th of September. But I think if we see all the writing on the wall, this is going to happen. Oma has gone out and said that they support this and recommend that people accept that this is going to happen. I think very interesting. If you read the announcement, S-Bank are saying that they are seeking to grow. They believe that they cannot grow organically and want to grow inorganically. We already know from the episode we've done with Rika that S-Bank has got an awful lot of customers because they have piggybacked on their loyalty card to their retail chain, which is Prisma and the S Group. But a lot of those customers are probably seen as being dormant customers. They use it for the cashback or the rewards they get for doing shopping in the supermarkets and buying petrol, but they're not very active as bank customers. S-Bank want to try and change that. They'd like to get more active customers and obviously acquiring a bank. And this is the interesting part. A lot of those customers already are S-Bank customers, but they're not active customers. But by acquiring Oma, they become active customers for all intents and purposes. So that's the first one. Secondly, Oma is quite a prevalent bank in the mortgage space in Finland. They have a lot of mortgages. So S-Bank is therefore obtaining a fairly hefty mortgage portfolio by buying Oma, which then expands the offering and the footprint that S-Bank has got. One interesting one as well is that Oma does have a SME or corporate banking arm. It's not a huge one, but they do have one. They purchased the corporate banking from Handelsbanken when Handelsbanken decided to leave Finland. Handelsbanken initially were looking at trying to sell their corporate capabilities to S-Bank. S-Bank said no, and Oma bought the corporate banking capabilities, or majority of it, from Handelsbanken. Now S-Bank is sort of inheriting that. So they said no to buy it initially. Now they're buying Oma and getting that corporate part round the roundabout, so to speak. So we can question, we can sit and try and figure out what is the key values here for S-Bank, but it makes them a bigger bank. And in the current economical situation, I think, as we've said already, the smaller banks are going to suffer. I think this is just the start. I think we're going to see more of this. There are more small banks or small financial institutions here in Finland that I think we potentially might get announcements of in the next, can I say 6 to 12 months, of further acquisitions that might happen down the road. I think for S-Bank, this is a very interesting journey to take, decision to make. It does help them to grow, and it'll be interesting to see if it puts them on the same level competing against the big boys like OP and Nordea here in Finland. But I think it's an interesting move by S-Bank. And maybe we need to get Rika back on to the podcast again to talk about, now that the news is out, how do they look at this? But Janne, how did you take the news?
Well, obviously it was first a relief because I did invest in Oma Säästöpankki after they crashed, but then it crashed again, so I got my money back. But as a bank, it's been interesting because Oma Säästöpankki has been a little bit of a rebel in this digitalization discussion. So they have not been talking about that very much. Instead, they've been talking about tailored services and niche markets, and they've been able to make a lot of fit, which wasn't exactly the case when they started to invest the loan portfolio. But now, of course, this is a big shift in the Finnish banking market. One bank less. Of course, consolidation is taking place, as pretty much everyone has predicted. But also from S-Bank's perspective, because they are not fully like a retailer with a banking license, but they're not fully like a traditional bank. They are sitting somewhere in between. And now this, of course, gives a bit more muscle on the banking side. And of course, Handelsbanken acquisition was something which happened also recently. But then on the other side, they like to be also more integrated with the S Group retail services. So I think they're in a very interesting position, but let's see if they're going to make big moves in the future.
Absolutely. Ville, how did you react to the news?
I mean, basically you covered it very well already. Nothing much to add, except perhaps that these smaller banks, again, like you said, we're going to see further consolidation in not only here in Finland but also across Europe, because many of these smaller banks, especially the ones that have been around for a while and they're operating on a legacy stack, they are staring down at the barrel of a massive regulatory pressure and implementation investments. Especially when you are a smaller bank, it's kind of it's proportionally quite bad. So all the updates on the payments regulation. Now we have the European digital identity wallets coming in. Then we have obviously the digital euro again coming. All of these are huge investments for the small banks, and they cannot stay in the positions where they are right now. So they either have to find ways to consolidate on the payment and banking infrastructure even further than they have already done, or they would have to outsource significant parts of the critical, especially transaction infrastructure. So then the other answer is that you merge with other players and become a bigger fish in the pond, and survive in that way. But yeah, I think it's an inevitable path of consolidation that we're going to see in the market now, and it's going to accelerate in the coming years.
Yes, no, I agree, and I've got some predictions, and I've always said in the past that I never make predictions, but I got some predictions of the other financial institutions in Finland that I think are potentially going to be targets in the near future. But I don't know if I want to mention it now or whether we leave it for a future episode. But it'll be interesting to see where it all goes. But there we've come to the end of this episode. We've shared the news headlines that we thought were most interesting from the month of July. Like Janne said, it was holiday season here in Finland. So it was a time for all of the hectic fintechs and banking executives to relax a little bit, slow down, and think about how they're going to drive success in the rest of this year. And we've seen some big movers and shakers like S-Bank. But any last words, Ville, before we close out this episode?
No, just keep tuned to the channel, a stream. There's going to be a lot of interesting live events that we're going to be recording in the very near future. And we have already lined up a fantastic lineup of interesting guests as well. So going to be a very active season. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And Janne, any final words from you?
No, it's good to be back, and hope to see you all around different activities and also online.
Absolutely. And of course, I need to start doing my personal plugging. I will do it again. We're coming to the end. Buy my book, Rip Out the Core, available in all good bookshops already, and not available in audio format, but we will ask Janne to read it with his beautiful Finnish accent so that we can get an audio book available. That way he gets to read it as well. We have come to the end of an episode of Fintech Daydreaming and Nordic Fintech Highlights. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. If you're still with us and you've enjoyed this discussion, which turned out to be predominantly on the digital euro, then hit the like button, leave us a comment. Tell us what headlines you saw in July that you thought were newsworthy and we maybe should have covered. Like I said, we will be back in 2 weeks' time. This has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.